All right, in this video, I want to talk about Revelation and try to put it in order. And hopefully this will help you understand the linear process of Revelation, how it is actually set up. Because it's basically how it's set up is looking at it from different points of view. Like you have one point of view and it tells you the story, and then you think it's over and done with, but then it brings you to a point where it tells you another point of view, and it starts from the beginning again, but from a different point of view. And then you get another point of view, and it tells you to the end, but it starts from the beginning again, but from a different point of view. Kind of like if you ever watched a show or a movie where you have a main character, you follow through the story, and all of a sudden it stops, rewinds, and now you're told the story from the beginning, but from the point of view of somebody else, right? And eventually you go through 3, 4, maybe 5 different characters, and by the end, you actually understand everything that actually happened once you get all the points of view together. Well, that's what we see in the book of Revelation, and I'm going to try to explain this to you, and then hopefully you can see this for yourself, and you let me know if it lines up. And if it doesn't line up, call me out, right? I'm not infallible. I can be wrong, but this is how I see it, and it makes sense, at least to me. And I hope it makes sense to you once you actually start reading this. All right. So, in Revelations chapter 3, 1 through 3, we have basically the age we're in, right? This is the age of John. And you're like, what, the age of John? Yeah, because John's name means Yod-He, Vav-He. Yod-He, Vav-He's grace. Right? And that's the period we're in, God's grace here. A chance to accept salvation through the one and only Jesus Christ, who offers his life to us here, as we are all judged and condemned to be crucified to death and hell. But Jesus steps in the way here, where we can exchange lives with him. Our imperfect mortal life for his perfect eternal life. Right? We have that opportunity to accept that. But we're actually here at the end of Revelation chapter 3. We're in the Laodicean church age. The Laodicean church age is this church that thinks it's rich in need of nothing. Right? It's full of itself, but in reality, it's blind. Right? It doesn't realize the condition it's really in. It's spiritually blind, so it obviously doesn't have the Spirit of God, because why else would it be blind? Right? It doesn't have spiritual sight that only the Spirit can give. It is poor, as in it doesn't have gold, as Jesus tells his church to come get gold. So it lacks faith, as Peter tells us that our faith is as gold tried in the fire, right? And he says you need that gold, that faith, to buy of him white raiments, because they're naked, showing that they have no righteousness, right? They are unjust. They need the faith to get the garments, right? Faith in this, you receive God's righteousness to cover your nakedness. He covers you with his righteousness if you can accept that salvation here. Right? Right here. You have an opportunity to accept that. But they think they don't need anything. But Jesus says, I spew you out, so they're not in Jesus. He says he's on the outside knocking on individual doors to see who would let him in. Right? Let me turn the Wi-Fi off here quick, just so messages don't pop up. So the church is not in him. He's not in that church. Right? But they think they're in need of nothing. And that they're rich and prosperous. Right? I see that as this harlot here, which is basically summed up with America, the United States of America. I think that's very much connected here, as right here, in between this period here of chapters 3 and 4, things start to happen, right? Everything's starting to open up. People are starting to see and to understand these things. And chapter 4 starts off with John being raptured. God's grace is lifted up, no more offered. This time of the grace and the free gift of salvation no longer offered. You had your chance to accept it. You left that on the table. Now, you're SOL. You're going to have to go through what's to come. And it's no longer by simply grace, right? It's faith and works now. You're going to have to reject the mark of the beast and suffer all the way through what's to come, or die as a martyr, rejecting the mark of the beast in order to be saved. And it's not going to be fun. That's just putting it very quickly, simply what you're going to have to go through. The detail of that is probably going to be hell on earth, quite literally. And at this rapture, as you can see, I have a lot in this bracket here. Because, well, this is actually part of this bracket here, so sorry about that. But with the rapture happening in Revelation chapter 4, we see it also happening in Revelation chapter 12, where the man-child is caught up, right? And I believe right at that time of the rapture, that's when the Laodicean church harlot is judged in Revelation 17 and 18. So that's what's taking place right at the rapture. Lot is being taken out, and there's sudden destruction, right? And his wife looked back. That wife of Lot there is the Laodicean church. Looked back, became a pillar of salt, right? Basically a witness against her and against everybody else there. And at the same time that destruction is going on, there's a shift going on towards Israel. And we have Revelation 11 letting us know what's happening at that same point is 2 witnesses are going about in Israel, right? I believe this is Moses and Elijah, right? The description of the 2 witnesses sound just like Moses and Elijah, what they did on here on earth. So there's no reason to think Enoch. Some people think Enoch just because they think everyone is appointed to death and at least to die once, but those of us that are raptured, we're never going to taste death, right? So there's exceptions to the rules, right? And at the same time, we see Revelation chapter 7 and 14. I believe this is what's actually going on right around the time of the rapture. It may even be part of the rapture, as this 144,000 is talked about in these 2 chapters, and it's kind of a bit of a mystery. The way that I'm reading it, I'm not sure if this is actually some chosen people out of the Christian church that happen to be of the Jewish bloodline, and they are raptured with us, as we kind of see in Revelation 14, but they're also sealed and go through at least part of what's to come. I don't know if they go 3.5 years through, or it looks more like a 3 there. 3.5 years through the thing, or they go through the whole 7 years. Not too sure. I don't think they would go all the way through the 7 years, but I think it's more likely this, if anything. But I think that's going on at that time. There's some kind of connection there. Something's going on. Or they might be what most people think. They're just 144,000 Jews that are turning to God as the rapture happens. The rapture is kind of like a sign that gets them to actually come to the scriptures and probably draws them into the New Testament to understand what happened. And then when they see the rapture being foretold in the New Testament, it gets them to follow Jesus. This is also a possibility, but I'm not too sure on that. this group is a kind of a mystery. And I could see it happening both ways. I don't know, to be honest. Because Elijah, it would be an example of this group, right? Elijah's rapture doesn't see death, but then he also comes back during the tribulation. The 144,000 could be like that. Matter of fact, the 144,000 could be a lot of people from the Old Testament. I don't know, to be honest. It's kind of a mysterious group. But it says that they have to be sealed in Revelation chapter 7 before the four winds, which I believe is what talks about in chapter 6 here, where we have the four horsemen of the apocalypse, right? I'm pretty sure I spelled that wrong. But it's all messy anyway. And the first one is the Antichrist on that white horse. And we see all this coming together, the first seal being opened, the Antichrist being revealed. We see that at this time, the harlot is destroyed, America is destroyed, and we at the same time, I have 12 written here twice, because we see at the beginning of chapter 12 the rapture, but then all of a sudden we got by the end point of Revelation chapter 12, we have this war in heaven. This beast has come down, and it's a seven-headed beast in heaven, and it's cast down. In Revelation chapter 13, we get to see what that beast is on the earth, right? This beast kind of coming together. And this same beast seems like the same beast that ends up taking out the two witnesses about 3.5 years in. They start their ministry, they preach for 3.5 years, and they are murdered, beheaded, but then they raise back to life 3 days later and are taken up to heaven. That might be the same time that the 144,000 are taken up, right? Not too sure, but this is at the time where the Antichrist is claiming to be God. In Revelation 13, it says he has a deadly wound, but it is healed. I think this is references to a lot of things, like Israel coming back, Egypt rising, the unholy Roman Empire reviving, and the Antichrist himself, the man of sin, being assassinated but raising from the dead. I think it applies to all these things, and maybe some other things resurrecting as well. This deadly wound coming back. And there's a lot to it, I think, to be honest. I think it covers a lot of things. That's why people are confused, is because it's actually showing us a lot of things, more than one. And I believe where the harlot, the America, is destroyed and this new beast system is coming about, it has to do with Israel. That's why the two witnesses are going to be there. And that first seal being open in Revelation chapter 6 here is that Antichrist revealed. In Daniel, it tells us about his home being destroyed. And then he moves to the promised land. And this is kind of like Solomon, who built the temple and he built his own house, as we're told in 1 Kings. Right? He not only did he build the temple, but he built his own house. And Solomon is a depiction of the Antichrist and has the first mention of 666 and the amount of gold that he brought in. And that's the number and the name of the beast, Solomon. There's a tie to that. And we have someone who's kind of fitting all these things, where Donald Trump, very haughty, arrogant man, very self-exalting and boasting himself up, has a lot of these depictions fitting him, where he's from a Syrian bloodline that migrated or immigrated to Germany, and his family comes from there, this Assyrian line that came from Germany. And Israel loves him. They printed his face on their coin, on their temple coin. He wants to help rebuild the third temple. And he has like a 99% approval rating in Israel. He actually wants to run for politics in Israel if, you know, he can't run again here in America, in the United States. And there's a lot of crazy stuff. This is just scratching the details about that. But here, Revelation 6, we also have, while all this is unfolding, we have this first 6 seals being opened. Right? Chapter 6, there's 6 seals being opened. Right? And then over here, we got chapter 8 and chapter 9, where we have I believe that's when the 7th seal is open, and then it talks about 7 trumpets. Now, it seems as though these trumpets are going on after, but they also seem to line up with the seals. So this might be happening quite similarly at the same time here, because some of these events seem very much connected. I believe with the first trumpet to the 2nd seal and on, they seem connected, quite similarly with the vials. So I'm not sure if 6, 8, 9, and 15 through 16, if this is like a straight line where by the 7th seal we got the trumpets, and by the 7th trumpet we start getting the vials, and it's in that order, right? One after the other. Or if they're somehow intertwined and connected, going on at the same time, because there is some kind of connections going on there, right? And you may notice down here I have 10 with a question mark, because I'm not quite sure where that fits in. It's kind of an interesting, weird chapter. An angel with 1 foot on the sea, 1 foot on the land. He speaks, kind of roars out there like 7 thunders, and he's going to write down what the 7 thunders said, which is interesting because 7 has to do with the church, right? And there's 7 thunders, and he's going to write it down. And it's kind of interesting because in the context of even the book of Revelation, the 7 is related, like I said, to the church. And you got 7 churches, and they're part of this 7-pronged candlestick, right? And it's like a spiritual, divine completion there. And it makes me think it has something to do with that, where people who don't have the Spirit, who don't believe, will hear thunders, but at the rapture, we will hear come up hither. Like in Revelation chapter 4, when John is raptured, and in Revelation 11, when the 2 witnesses are raptured, they are told to come up hither, right? That's the same thing John writes about in his gospel, that when God spoke and said something about Jesus, some people heard an angel, what they thought was an angel, and then some people heard a thunder. They didn't know what it was, right? Because there's some people who are believers and some are not, right? So I'm not sure if Revelation 10 is talking about something going on here right at the rapture, because John is prophesying up into the rapture, and then he's told he's got to prophesy again, I guess, to the nations about after the rapture, because it's like 2 dispensations, right? Because at this time, in chapters 1 and 3, you have the gospel of grace that has to do all about what Jesus did, right? 1 Corinthians 15, verses 1 through 4 there. That's your gospel simply put. Just connect that to Romans 4:22 through, I believe the ending verse in that chapter is 25, about receiving God's righteousness by believing this gospel. But once you get to Revelation 14 here, I'm going to actually start changing the color here. Revelation 14, you can see the blue here. We notice that there's 3 angels who are flying around, and what are they doing? The first one says to worship God, the creator of all things, right? And this is the everlasting gospel. But if you notice, it has nothing to do with this gospel in this age that we're in right now. It's a different gospel. Because the rapture's happened, John, Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh's grace has been lifted. You've rejected this free gift over here. And now, you best worship God and turn from your sins, or else you're SOL, right? You're screwed, right? And then the second angel says, Babylon is fallen, right? So it's right at the beginning there. This other gospel is being preached. Babylon is fallen, right? Been judged, right? This Laodicean church here, the judgment starts with the house of God, right? So right when all this happens, the first thing to get judged is going to be God's people. The Laodicean church judged right there at the beginning. And then what's the third angel who's flying around? What is he saying? He's saying anybody who worships the beast or his image and takes his mark in their right hand or their forehead is damned, right? They have no hope. They're going to be lost, right? So we see all that stuff, all these things lining up to be happening at this time. But chapter 10 here could easily be something that's going on like here, 3.5 years in. Potentially, I can't see it happening at the very end. I mean, it potentially could, because it talks about there being time no more, right? And it mentions something about at the time of the seventh angel sounding, which actually happens back here. So something about that seventh angel sounding its trumpet might actually indicate that that's the midpoint, is at that seventh trumpet, and that something's happening there, right? Not too sure. So then the trumpets and the vials are in the second half of this tribulation. It's kind of like the seals are a wake-up call. If that doesn't wake you up, you have some trumpets and then the vials, right? And then what I haven't talked about is the very ending here, because I think what I talked about right now is the gist of the main portion of it that probably gives most people the tough time here. Because Revelation 4 and 5 is the rapture and the church is in heaven. And the rest of this stuff lines up with that. And the only issue I got is where chapter 10 really fits in. Because it can fit in. Is it something going on at the beginning? Is it something going on halfway through? Not quite sure. And the same thing with the trumpets and vials. Is it something linear? Right? Something linear going on here? Or is it something kind of going on at the same time? I'm leaning towards linear, but I'm not too sure, to be honest. But once we get to chapter 19, we have the return of Jesus, a 1,000-year kingdom. And then the rest of the book is talking about what happens for the 1,000 years, what happens after that 1,000 years, real briefly, and then the new heavens and the new earth. I think we can all get that one down. That seems to be pretty easy. We know that all this is happening after the great tribulation, the time of Jacob's trouble is done. So this part is pretty easy. You know, chapters 1 through 3, easy to place that. Chapters 19 through 22, easy to place that. And I think a good chunk of this I find very easy to place. It's basically 10 is the biggest question mark. And this, I'm pretty sure, is linear, verse chapters 8 and 9 and 15 and 16. But I'm not too sure. Like I said, there's time no longer in the sounding of the seventh angel, like if I go to it real quick, let me open this up real quick to Revelation chapter 10. And it says at verse 7. Interesting that it's at verse 7 too. But in the days of the voice of the seventh angel, when he shall begin to sound, the mystery of God should be finished, as he hath declared to his servants the prophets. All right, so this is Revelation 10, but it's talking about something from Revelation 8, right? As it says here in Revelation 8 at verse 1, and when he had opened the seventh seal, there was silence in heaven about the space of a half hour. Oh, I'm sorry, not chapter 8. Chapter 9. I got that mixed up. I got the seventh seal mixed up with the seventh trumpet. And it's in chapter 9 where it mentions at verse... Oh man, where is this? At verse 14 is the sixth angel sounded his trumpet. Oh yeah, what am I talking about? It's actually chapter 15. I got that way off. Sorry about that, everybody. Chapter 15, where it has the seven angels with the seven last plagues, and I think... What? I'm sorry, I got this all mixed up. Nope, chapter 15, it does just start with the seven angels with the seven last plagues. That's weird. Just let me skim through this real quick here. All right. Oh, yeah, it's at the end of chapter 11, isn't it? Man. Yes, the seventh angel sounds in chapter 11 is the final. So I got to put that over here too. Chapter 11 is also part of this over here. And that's when that seventh angel sounds. Right, so there seems to be some connection there to Revelation 10 actually being connected to, I guess, halfway through or so. Right? Something like that. Because in Revelation 11, we have that the seventh angel sounded at verse 15. Right? And that's when it says the kingdoms have become gods. Right? So that's when he's actually claimed everything. And it's probably about halfway through, that's when he wants to come back. But then, I believe on earth, that's when Satan is claiming he is God, puts the two witnesses down. He's actually fighting against what God has done. He's rejecting him being the ruler. He's trying to fight back against that. He's claiming to be God. And now he's preparing for the return of Jesus to fight against him. And that's when we have probably this part. The seventh trumpet is probably around the halfway point. About 3.5 years in. We'll put that here. Seventh trump is about here at the 3.5 years in. And so that would move the trumpets, or I should say chapter 6, 8, and 9 is in the first 3.5 years. Right? So if I did a timeline here, I should change the color here. So if I did a quick timeline over here, hopefully I didn't mess you up too much. But right here is, we'll put an R for rapture. And then we'll have We'll put an S for the sealed, the 144,000 sealed, to right about this same time as Revelation 7 and 14 show that we have these 144,000 who are sealed and protected. And we even read about these creatures that come up out of the bottomless pit that can't hurt the ones who have the seal of God. But we also know that the people who don't have the seal of God but are still on God's side can be martyred, right? So we know that, there's something going on there. There's a special group there that are protected as they go through. Just like the two witnesses over here is a special group of people that can basically do what they want, even breathe fire out and devour the people who try to stop them, right? And we even have that at this time. We also have, we'll put a 2W here for the two witnesses. All this is starting right here. And we have, let's make this look like a weird green fireball, because also the destruction of the harlot, the Laodicean church, America, Babylon there. I think that's all summed up together, right? That great city, the whore. Well, Laodicea is supposed to be a city as well, right? I think there's all kinds of connection to that. All that's starting at the beginning point of this timeline. And then after this, we're going to have, like it has in Revelation 7 and 14, we have these martyrs, right? Like in Revelation 7, it talks about the 144,000, but then a great number of people from all the different nations, which I think have to do with like we'll put here the fifth seal, 5S here. It looks kind of like 5 or SS, but it's supposed to be the fifth seal there. I think that's where we're going to have a lot of these martyrs from Revelation chapter 7 and 14, where it's saying to resist the mark of the beast. I believe the mark of the beast is going to be giving out at the very beginning, right? It's just not going to probably be mandatory at first. And sorry about that. And we even read in Revelation 14, I believe, is actually talking about how all this starts when the harlot is destroyed. We actually got what Revelation says is the harvest. We got two harvests going on, right? We got a wheat harvest and we got a grape harvest. Well, the grape harvest is the wrath of God being tread out. I think this is all happening here at the starting point here. And by like the fifth seal, you get a bunch of the martyrs being mentioned who are calling out in heaven. And then we have all the seals done. And then the seventh trumpet, we'll put a big T here, right in about the midpoint here. We have the seventh trumpet. We have the death of the two witnesses and their rapture, and probably taken with them is the 144,000. We have the beast has a deadly wound, but he comes back, and that's when he kills the two witnesses. All right, he's exalting himself to be God. And this is where I believe the mark of the beast is enforced, because when he receives the deadly wound and he revives, that's when the image is enforced. And if you don't accept it, you are now put to death, where before you could willingly accept it or reject it. It'd just be hard for you to live without it and to work in society. But now if you don't take it, you are going to be put to death, right? And then after this point, we would have chapters 15 and 16. We have the vials going on in this second half. And I believe that takes up the next 3.5 years, is all this going on. And there isn't much else telling you about what happens after this point, right? Revelation 12 talks about how the woman is hiding in the wilderness for this first. Let's erase some of this here. I'll make some room here. So in Revelation 12, for this first 3.5 year part, the woman hides, or there's a place prepared for her, right? But then it mentions how there's another 3.5 years where she's given wings to escape And I'm not sure if that's wings to flee to Petra, a place over there, to hide for the next 3.5 years, or if that's reference to something else. I think that means they're given wings of the harlot that has been destroyed, the eagle, America. And yeah, just going over some things real quick, looking at these chapters, see if anything flies up into my forefront of my mind here. But I think that's everything. Before this timeline starts, we get chapters 1 through 3. And at that starting point, all those things happen. The midpoint, by the midpoint, the most of what we've seen in Revelation actually happens. What we're actually reading about quite a bit is mostly about the first 3.5 years. And then all that should be warning. So by the time you get halfway through, you should be prepared not to take it. Right? You should know very well if you take it, you're damned. So then by that time, when you have to take it or you'll die, those vials come out because now God's wrath is upon you because he told you not to take it. Right? At that same time, at the beginning point here, we'll put the 3 A's here. The 3 angels are sending their message out too. Babylon, worship God. Babylon is fallen and don't take the mark. Right? They're already doing this at the very beginning. Right? So that's how it would play out. And just to recap, this is giving me a little trouble here. There we go. Wanted to make this eraser bigger. I'll go through it real quick here. Make a quick timeline as a recap. Try to make it a little cleaner here. All right, yeah, sometimes it messes up on me here. All right. Let's go I'll go back with red here. All right, so we got the beginning here. Chapters 1 through 3. And then at chapter 4, chapter 12, actually tells us at the beginning of the rapture, and connected to that is Revelations chapter 7 and 14 about the 144,000. And also Revelation 11, the 2 witnesses show up. And right at this time, or shortly after, we have Revelation 6 with the first seal being opened. I'm not too sure how long after all these things that happens. I think these are pretty quick successions. And at this same time, we have Revelation 17 and 18 also happening at the beginning, the destruction of the harlot, like Laodicea. We'll put an L here that leads up to this and ends up being the one that is destroyed here, is rich and thinks she's in need of nothing, but she's a harlot. Right? The lukewarm church. And then let's mark the halfway point right about here somewhere. And this halfway point, we read about this where Revelation 13 tells us about the deadly wound, and 11 hints at this as well. And this is about the halfway point where the 2 witnesses, they are put down by the beast rising up, and this is where the mark will now be enforced. If you don't take it, you will die. So we have Revelations 8 and 9 being done here. And the 7th trumpet was in chapter 14, right? Because this is Why I have these chapters here kind of slanting off from the beginning is because they'll talk about the beginning, what happens here, like the rapture, but then they'll veer off and start telling us about what's happening up until this point here, right? Like Revelation 7 tells us about the 144,000 sealed before the four winds of are let loose, and I believe those are the four horsemen that come out at this seal here, and that there's a bunch of martyrs, and that's at the fifth seal somewhere in here. We got the martyrs, we got the harvest going on, right? All this is going on. We'll put at the top here a wheat harvest, and then we got a grape harvest, right? We got God harvesting his people, and also the wrath of God. But, this is still going on here, but it's more of the gleanings at the end here. But a main chunk of the harvest is done in the first 3.5 years. We also have, we have what's going on here at the beginning. We got rapture. We got the two witnesses. We got the 144,000. We got the three angels sending their messages. We got Babylon destroyed, right? And we got the AC being revealed. Israel's going to be rising up as an important thing. All right, I can just put that all over here, right? Let me just change the color. We'll put, to show that it's a big deal, we're going to just write Israel here with their color here. Right, a big deal, even throughout the whole thing. Right? And yeah, the end point is, again, chapters 19 through 22. And actually, what would be the end part here would be starting about here. We have Revelation 15 and 16 is going on in this second half. Right? These are the vials being poured out. That's how that seems to be playing out. Right? So I think I got it all covered here. Chapters 1 and 3. I should put 4 and 5 next to each other. 6 right here. 7 right there. 8 and 9. 10. I think we'll put 10 right here because I think it is giving a reference to the beginning. The 7 thunders is a mystery. And 7, I think, is tied to the church somehow. And it's a mystery. And then it's giving reference to this midpoint when the 7th angel with the 7th trumpet sounds, I believe, is about the midpoint. Right? So chapter 10 is connected to all this. It's something strange that's going on during this time between these points, the beginning and the midpoint. Right? And then we get 11 dealing with the two witnesses. And I think the final seal being opened, I believe, in that chapter as well. And chapter 12, we have talking about the rapture, and then the woman Israel as a place prepared for her for 3.5 years. And Revelation 13 talks about what this beast is. When the dragon is cast down to earth, we can just put a big 13 here. That's when this beast is coming up. Right? And it ultimately talks about what happens to it with a deadly wound and it coming back up. And everybody's like, who can war against this beast? And it gives out the mark. And yeah, what's after that? We got chapter 14, already went over. 15 and 16, about the vials. 7 and 18, again, about the beginning of the harlot being destroyed. And then the end is 19 through 22. Now, I hope this all made sense to you. I know I kind of go a little fast. I throw a lot at you. Might have to write this stuff down, and then you'd have to read through Revelation to see what I'm saying here. And to really show you, we would have to sit down together. We'd have to read through and mark points that are on a timeline. But that's that for now. Thank you for watching all the way through. I appreciate it. Hope you learned something. You enjoyed this. If you think I'm onto something, hey, let me know. If you have trouble following along, let me know. I'll try to redo this and simplify it, try to go through a little slower. Maybe make some key points at certain areas. If you think I'm wrong or something doesn't make sense, let me know. But if you want to help out, please pray to our Heavenly Father right now that Jesus would keep me going and keep this ministry going. Just an amen in Jesus' name should be all I need to keep this going. But if you want to help us some more, please like, subscribe, hit that bell icon, share the video, share the channel, interact with the comments section. It really help out a lot. And this is not monetized, so to keep this ministry going, please help out if you can and if you want to financially. There's 4 ways you can do so in the info box below. So thank you again for watching. Take care, and I'll see you in the next one.